protected. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I've got to say that I read this report, which I think can be fairly characterised as a damning report, with a lot of discomfort, and it raised many questions for me. Some of the questions are, how did we get to the point we're at the moment? And other questions about where do we go next? And so I just want to address some of the questions around that were raised for me in the report about how did we get to this point. Because what this shows us is that in the words of the Privacy Commissioner, a system was put in place prematurely, without adequate consideration of privacy risks or mitigation of those risks. And that it's not as if the opposition and the community organisations who were being told they had to do this had not raised concerns about these issues. We have been since at least October last year. And we have had, in response from the Minister, constant assurances that there's nothing to see here, that as opposition members and community organisations and that the public could have absolute confidence in the rollout of this information, individual client data information sharing, and that we should just trust in the process and that MSD was onto it. Well, this report tells us that actually we are validated in our concerns, that already there has been a privacy breach and that the basics of oversight were not done, that the Privacy Commissioner said he would have expected a privacy impact assessment to have happened before this process was initiated, to consider what the privacy risks might be and how they could be mitigated. But that work is still not completed. This is something that was started in March last year, and we have had assurances that this government is all over it and that they are holding privacy issues or concerns, keeping strong oversight of that. And yet the absolute first step was never done, has still not been done. That the Privacy Commissioner was briefed on the intention for this program in June last year. And the Privacy Commissioner was told at that time that there was going to be an ability for sensitive services to opt out of sharing this individual client data, and that it was going to be aggregated data for research purposes. And then somehow between June and December, the actual plan changed significantly to the point that in December it became clear that the policy intent was then for individual client data to be able to be used for sharing and matching with other agencies. And this is quoting from the Privacy Commissioner's report. This is not me being mischievous. This is not a misrepresentation of what the policy is. And we, on this, I'll speak for myself, have never insinuated that that may have been matching or sharing with work and income. That is not. It was with anyone, because the initial intent was that it would be anonymised data for research purposes, and that changed. And it does not seem as if the Privacy Commissioner, who we've been told has been kept in the loop along the way on this, was told of that change, which is a fundamental one. It's a completely different policy with significantly more privacy risks. And it does not sound as if he was told. And if he was, we can gather from the Minister's answers this afternoon that the Minister never checked to see if he was told or what his response to those changes might have been. So we have a very significant issue, and I would say of competence for a minister, that we have a minister who's come to this House repeatedly saying, yes, she gave us assurances that the privacy of individuals would be protected. And yet she didn't ensure a privacy impact assessment was done. She didn't check to see if the Privacy Commissioner had been informed or what his response was to a massive change, significant change in the policy. And she can't have even found out the method for collecting the information in that first stage, because surely the fact that MSD was collecting information through a spreadsheet would have raised alarm. And then I would have thought it would have raised alarm to hear that they were planning on collecting individual data information via spreadsheet, but if we'll just give her the benefit of the doubt for not having asked that question, which again is a competence issue, but just say we'll let that go, that she got this report, or surely would have asked around some detail of that data collection in that initial stage from her briefing, or expected that from officials, to have found out that the Privacy Commissioner said this is not secure and identified significant risk. And yet she waited until there was a breach before she stopped collecting that information, despite significant, clear, direct warning that the method that was being used was not secure and not safe. That is a massive competence issue, and I think should be worrying everyone in this House as well as the public, because if we are to have faith in the process going forward, if we are to have faith in the protection of the well-being of New Zealanders, then we need to know that the Minister who has oversight of such significant reforms knows what questions to be asking, and knows and will be making sure that she's getting the right answers. Because if she doesn't know what questions to ask, if she isn't actually making the effort to ask those questions, then how can we be sure that there is going to be safe implementation of such a radical policy? We can't be sure. And that brings up some of the other issues that we're seeing and the inconsistencies I heard from the Minister earlier, where she's saying, yes, that they need to collect the individual data, because without it, they can't be sure that people are getting the right services. And she quotes examples of the children's team and Whānau Ora, as if those systems don't have information sharing capability at the moment. They do. And there's no actual translation of how that could translate to knowing if an individual is getting a right service, if that information is going to some data analyst sitting in an office in Wellington. How? And that they still have not given agencies an assurance that there will be no adverse consequences for people of that information being shared. So that it's identified that there will be the ability for them, MSD, to share that information with the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Education. And within MSD, that also the Minister mentioned Oranga Tamariki. And we know at the moment that people are not accessing healthcare. I've been told of several examples of victims of domestic violence not accessing healthcare services because they are scared of reports going to Child, Youth and Family and losing their kids. So here we have a very valid concern, and that people will potentially not access services if information is being shared in that way. And yet, the Minister has given us no assurance that that won't happen. It has not been said. And we are hearing that it's about making sure that people aren't getting, services aren't being duplicated, or that people are getting the right service, which gives an indication that actually, if that's to be relevant or meaningful, that they would actually intervene if they found an individual wasn't accessing a service, and go to them and tell them, we think you should be accessing a service, or that if somebody's accessing many, they're going to go in and try and reduce the number of services they're accessing. Now that is an adverse outcome, I would suggest, if people have chosen to access those services. And the Minister's saying it needs it because for the information to be meaningful, but now they're going to bring in some exemptions. But yet then how, if it's not complete information, then again, how is it meaningful? If they're saying that they're not going to collect it all, but they need to know whether everyone's accessing it and whether the services is going in the places it needs, but it's only partial information, then again, how is it meaningful? How will it achieve the goals that the Minister is saying it is? Again, it raises significant issues of competence, and we have no ability to be secure in the rights, that people will have their rights protected.
Mr. Speaker.
Derek Ward.
Oh. Before I begin, sir,